What up, what up, what up? It is Ninja on a Ninja, and today is finally the day I take down this math thing. Basically, and what you need to know, and what I'd like the world to know, I think a lot of people know this, like smart people. There might be some people who are just kind of moseying along, basically. They're the herd, essentially. And some people might know this, but I think a lot of people don't as well. So, basically, there's two maths, basically. Okay? And there is the math that is true math, where the numbers lead to chaos, because I'm not sure if you know this, but that's nature. Nature leads to chaos. Like, we die eventually because of the fact that nature leads to chaos. Basically, no matter what, we die. Somewhere in our system, somewhere in something, it dies. And basically, it's true in numbers as well. They break down and they blow up and they die and they explode, okay? Now, with that said, what they have done essentially is they created a second math basically, and this is the math that we all use and that we all know and that might be familiar to you basically, and that's where numbers work and everything works and algorithms work and so forth and so on. All these rules and regulations and whatnot come to exist, basically. And my way of explaining things to most people, because I have trouble explaining things to most people for reasons I will keep under the radar for now. Um, but basically I use other, like my last, or not my last video, but one of my videos before, like the video before last, I featured Destiny, and basically he presented an argument and I touched in on it and basically explained how he was wrong, or how he, like, he chucked a dart at the dartboard and he landed at 8, and I just moved it to 20. That's all I did, is I just aimed, I took it and shot it at 20, and just kept doing that. At least to my knowledge, and I welcome any arguments from anybody else to what I said, and see if you agree or disagree or whatever. But I believe that I'm correct. So, anyways, we're gonna watch this, and I'm going to respond to it. Maybe a few hours. We'll see. We'll see. Anyways, let's get to it.
We call them prime numbers, but are those values universal?
I think you meet an alien species. They come to Earth. They don't know the language. They're gonna be like, what do you mean by this word prime? You start tapping out like 2 taps, 3 taps, 5 taps. You do that, they'll be like, I gotcha.
They're tapping out the Glypsorpian sequence. Wow.
Exactly.
So already we have that's not true. And basically, if another species, let alone another person who's not familiar with, like, let's say I don't know math, I'm not going to come to your conclusions, basically, because again, it's bullshit. It's things we created to make sense out of numbers, and that's it. So your argument is that you created, or that you found it, and your argument essentially is that they're gonna find it too. That's what you're saying in theory should happen, but in reality they won't find it because it's made by you. That would be like saying I came up with this puzzle piece and you came up with the same puzzle. It's not, no, because you made it and yours is like a triangle and mine's a square. It's like, wait a minute, they don't do not the same thing. But it's like Spanish, perfect example. Like, go to Mexico and try to speak Spanish. You're not gonna be like, oh, I know what that means. Ah, hola de perro de chupa ¿cómo estás? Mira de madre, whatever. Like, no, it's not gonna work. Basically, is my point. Essentially, it's because that's what math is. It's made up. It's a language, basically. So no, that won't happen. What they're saying won't happen. And already right there, you can call it quits and just you're done with it because all three of them are in agreement, but all three of them are stupid and wrong, especially Neil deGrasse Tyson, who seems to be having a great fucking time. But again, I just showed you that's not true. So, anyways, continue.
Yeah, in every other field, there's a little bit of doubt. And the thing that really separates math out from the other things is that there is no more doubt. It's a truly rigorous proof.
No, it's not. You can't prove a
This
language.
is Star Talk. Neil deGrasse Tyson, you're a personal astrophysicist. Got Chuck Nice with me. Chuck, how you doing, man?
Oh man, I'm feeling great, Neil.
Professional comedian and my co-host.
That's correct.
In that order.
Sometimes in that way.
So Chuck, I think
True.
parts of this is gonna be a cosmic queries,
Why?
but we have a lot to cover. So it's not gonna be a full up cosmic queries. It's gonna be, let's slip in what we can because the subject is math.
What? The language of the universe?
See? He even calls it the language of the universe. It's a language. It's an earth thing.
Learn math, kid. It's the language of the universe.
It's the language of the earth. Shake your head at
You want
that.
to talk to the universe? You learn math.
No, you don't. No, you don't.
And there's one of the funnest experts out there
Okay.
on this very subject, and his name is Grant Sanderson. Grant, welcome to Star Talk.
Oops.
Oh, it's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you studied math in college.
Yeah,
and
that's
you
fine.
Came out and you worked for the Khan Academy. Oh my gosh, if you've never
the
seen,
Khan Academy.
I know, if you've never like logged into Khan Academy, you go there and you can learn everything about everything.
Yep.
And they care about how you learn. They don't just slap you with a textbook. And it's a completely different experience. I would call it even joyous, learning about practically every subject there is to learn.
And if you fail to learn, you can look over your head while clenching your fists and going, Khan!
Star Trek reference there for those who are not
What?
geek enough to catch it.
Right.
So Grant, you have multiple math platforms. Like you have a podcast, blog, YouTube. You have brilliant postings that millions of views. And this is not trivial math that you're doing. It's like real. When I say real, I mean it's the kind of math that most people would walk by and say, I don't need to know that. I don't want to know it. It's got nothing to do with me. Yet you somehow turned the tables on that. Now, before I ask you my first question, Chuck wants to ask you his first question.
Yeah, and here's my first question, Grant. And it may sound a bit glib, but it's not. I'm very serious. What the hell is math? Okay. What
Okay,
the
yeah.
Math is bullshit. It's a language.
hell is math?
What is
Seriously.
math?
Because,
What-
you know,
What the hell is math?
what the hell
What
is
the hell
math?
is math? Okay,
But
what the
and
hell is
here's why I asked, just so that you'll
Yeah.
get a bit more context, okay? One, we started off by saying, hey, it's the language of the universe. You hear that all the time. But
Wrong.
when I think of it, I'm like, all right, so we have these symbols and we've attached values to these symbols, and then these values have concepts that are surrounding the values and the symbols. If I came from another galaxy, I wouldn't know your freaking math. So how
Right.
is the universe
Right.
universal language?
Right.
Well, okay, so it reminds me a little. This question came to me in another form. I was at this wedding recently.
So before he gets into his wedding example, I just want to point out that he's basically correct. Basically. So we're going to go back.
These values all right, so we have these symbols and we've attached values to these symbols, and then these values have concepts that are surrounding the values and the symbols. If I came from another galaxy, I wouldn't know your freaking.
You don't even need to come from another galaxy. That's my point. You can come from down the street. You can come from the same woman, basically. There is a reason why there is a math class. Basically, the same thing that the reason why there's an English class, because it's a language. You're learning a language. It's not a metric for anything other than itself. So outside of that argument, there's nothing there. So
In math. So how is it the universal?
that's
Well, okay, so it reminds.
that's why I'm curious. That's exactly why I'm
So how is
curious.
it the universal language?
Well,
Go ahead. Good
so
luck.
it reminds me a little. This question came to me in another form. I was at this wedding recently, and a person I was just meeting there who knew I did online math stuff
Okay.
said very sincerely, like, "Why is geometry math?" Which is a different question from what you're asking, but it sort of gets into this, like, what do we?
No. So why is geometry math? Okay. Geometry it's not really math. That's why we call it geometry and not just blanket statement math. Basically, if you think about it, it's actually not. So that question's that's what I would say. Being that that's the first time that I've heard that question, I would tell them that geometry is not math, but we use math to do geometry. So, what's your
Mean by
answer?
math? And I initially answered saying it's something that we can know very precisely. So one of the oldest texts in math is Euclid's Elements, and one of the things he did there is he starts by laying out some axioms, saying assume these things are true, assume that lines are a thing, assume that points are a thing,
Assume that this pretend bullshit made up fairy tale that I'm talking about is real.
that if you have a point that's not on the line, it's possible to draw a line that's parallel to it. These sorts of things. And with just 5 of these assumptions, then rigorously proves things that have to be true beyond any doubt. So in every other field, there's a little bit of doubt. In every other field, you've got this little thing in the back of your mind that asks about experimental error, asks you, maybe I didn't observe what there should be. And the thing that really separates math out from the other things is that assuming you agree on the axioms, everything else, there is no more doubt. It's a truly rigorous proof.
Aliens might use different symbols, but all
A different proof of what, though? Like, you made a square, right? That's geometry, right? And you can say metrics as far as inches and feet and yards and whatever, miles and kilometers or whatever, and you can use math to equate those numbers that are in that area, but it's still not really proving anything at all if you think about it. Like what you're saying right here, like this is exactly it.
ultimately, we're thinking
It's a truly rigorous proof.
Right here.
aliens might use different symbols, but ultimately, we're thinking math is out there to be grabbed by whoever has the capacity for logical thought.
But it raises this question, like, what are they?
Okay, so they use what do you call
Whoever is out there to be symbols, but ultimately,
different symbols. That's to be further explained.
we're thinking math is out there to be grabbed by whoever has the capacity for logical thought.
I'm assuming he means different plus, different minus, and different numbers, basically. So what you're saying is a different language. You're just trying to say it's the same thing of math. Like, you're trying to justify basically saying that math, you're allowed to take your definition and remove it and apply their definition, and you just, oh, it's math. That's basically math. No, it's not. You're completely changing it at that point. Like, if it's different syllables and symbols and whatever, how is it still math? That would be like saying Germany English or German and English are the same thing, right? It's
But it raises this question, like, what are the axioms? Like, where do you start? I mean, you can have all sorts of different maths. Like, once you're in an undergrad math major,
I've
you
never
take all of these
watched
courses,
this,
like group theory,
by
or
the way.
topology, or whatnot, and they always start by
Just
here,
I have never watched this video, by the way.
you can have all sorts of different maths. Like, once you're in an undergrad math major, you take all of these courses, like group theory or topology or whatnot, and they always start by saying, here's some definitions. I'm like, here's the definition of a group, and yada yada. It's a set with some added stuff. It looks like gobbledygook, and then you proceed forward and prove stuff. But I think a very reasonable question that the students could always have is like, why is this the object we're starting with? We could construct all sorts of other objects and move forward.
Right.
And so there is this interplay with how it relates to the world and whether the math that you're developing is useful or not. Because I think if you take like a purely logical standpoint, you can develop a whole bunch of useless math. And in fact, you could ask if some of the math being developed now, like, maybe will never be useful. But history has this strange trajectory of things that seem
I don't know
to be
what
useless
you're
coming back and being useful. But it's a real deep question why.
There's some mathematicians who do math only because they're pretty sure it will never be useful.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was this rather famous mathematician, Hardy, who, this was around the time of World War II. He was writing this book called A Mathematician's Lament, or sorry, Mathematician's Apology.
Hardy was one of the teachers of Ramanujan, if I remember.
He was the one who answered Ramanujan's letter and like brought him in. Great mathematician.
Right, and he was played by who's the actor in the film?
Jeremy Irons, I think.
Jeremy Irons. In fact,
yeah.
Those who love our archives can dig up our Jeremy Irons interview, where we talk about that film where he played Hardy the mathematician, and to get his reflections on what that whole story meant to him. So I'm sorry. I'm just plugging our archive.
One of my favorite actors combined with one of my favorite people in history. So it's like, it's just such fate for me. I can't believe I haven't listened to that. But I mean, Hardy wrote he was sort of delighting in the fact that math will never be, certain kinds of math, and he was highlighting, the theory of prime numbers and relativity will never be used as instruments of war, which is this irony looking back, because, prime numbers have a lot to do with cryptography.
You don't need a lot of math. Like prime numbers, like he's right. I wish I could talk to the guy who made this book. He probably knows a lot more, cause you're leading us down this loophole where we're eventually gonna catch dragons, and as is, dragons aren't real. But one day you're gonna see that's a dragon, and we're like, wow, that's a dragon, cool. In reality, it's a cow, or it's like a moose or something, right? But you're changing the word, and like nothing fits basically. Like you're jumping around in loopy la land. That's what I'm saying. Like I'm separating that from math, basically. And even then, there's still the bullshit math, and there's real math. So
relativity has everything to do with, GPS and everything with that.
Whatever.
Idiot.
It didn't but the fact that he delighted in it is a little strange, right? And it's something you would only expect from an academic, maybe. But it's like even when they're trying not to make it useful, right? Even one of them is trying not to. It seems to kind of come back. And so to your question, Chuck, on what is math? If we just said it's the things that we can know for sure, that doesn't really feel satisfying, because that somehow doesn't tie into this bizarre fact where it also describes the world.
I would add that in the film Contact, not in the book, but in the film, the aliens first communicated with us using pulses
Yeah,
that
prime number
traced out
pulses.
prime numbers. There are a lot of special sequences. That's probably the simplest of the special sequences. That was another use of prime numbers. If we don't know anything about prime numbers,
That's what I'm going to say. Let's say, for instance, we call them prime numbers, but are those values universal?
So I think you meet an alien species. They come to Earth.
No. Because there's this thing that math uses. It's called power 10, power 9, power 8, and whatever. Well, that would be like, let's just say that powers don't matter, right? Well, compare power 11 to power 10. Now, remove all of the numbers and replace them with different numbers. Like, how are you going to say it's the same thing? It's not. Like, it may be the same rule for this example, but that's as far as it goes, this example. Whereas, like you see, I'm making a square with my hands. There's a reason for the square because outside of this square is where aliens are. So when we get it, like, when we're like, what did you say? In reality, all they said was, hi, we're friendly. How are you doing today? But in our minds, it came up, get down, get to the job. And we're like, what the fuck? You know what I'm saying? That's because that's what it is. But these fucking airheads are so small-minded that they think math is the language of the universe, and it's not.
You say, like, do you know about prime numbers?
I'm
They don't
yelling.
know the
I gotta
language.
calm
They
down.
go, what do you mean by this word prime?
Sorry.
You start tapping out like 2 taps, 3 taps, 5 taps. You do that. The alien species has done like any thinking at all. They'll be like, I gotcha. It's such a natural sequence. It's like as soon as
Because you're assuming that they're talking about the same system that you're using. Like, yeah, I can pick it up, but we're not using your system. We're using something completely different. Like, for all you know, it's 13 zip zorbs, and that's the same thing as 10 inches, but it's 13 zip zorbs. And so you 5, and it's like, what the hell's a 5? Like, you know what I'm saying? It's perfectly natural in your small-minded reference of mind, but to an alien, it's still, what the fuck are you talking about?
you have counting numbers and then you start to ask curious questions, any intelligent entity is going to stumble on like primes being a thing.
No.
Just to be clear, all of this assumes.
Because, again, there would be no such thing as power 9, power 8, and power 7 if there was such thing as numbers. It would just be 10. There wouldn't be power 9 and power 11 and whatever. It would be 10. But because you have discovered power 9, power 8, or you made up power 9 and power 8, that just shows you that that can be a train of thought.
That they count in base 10. Okay.
See?
It doesn't at all.
Yes, it does.
No,
Exactly.
No. If you just tap twice,
Well, it's the number you
here's how
assign to it.
represent
Sure. Got it.
Yeah,
That's what
so
you
how
call
you
it.
write down the number. Yeah,
That's what you
call it.
Write down the number.
Doesn't at all.
Yes, it does.
No, not. If you just tap twice.
Well, it's the number you
here's how
assign to it.
represent
Sure.
it.
Got it.
Yeah,
That's what
so
you
how
call
you
it.
write down the number. Yeah,
That's
what you call it.
Write down the number. You got
Okay.
No. So we would write 1, 3. Maybe they have a different base 10. But if you just do 13 taps, and then you do 17 taps, right? And
That's
you keep
it.
doing all the prime, like any AI, any alien, all of them are going to
No.
be in agreement that like this one's important.
No. Because again, that's using your structure. You're talking about as far as you are using it, because you're assuming that math is around the universe, and it's not. That's what I'm telling you. Like, that's how you have to learn in school. Like, you have to learn English in schools, not to talk, because you learn how to do that around the house. I can talk to the people around my house. Like, I know enough Spanish to get by around the house. But I can't lead a nation unless I go to school and master my math, or my language, rather. Well, that's the same thing for math, basically. And again, it's the language of the universe because it's the same thing as a language. It can be easily replaced and or displaced. Like, what's it called? Let's see. I'm curious. Let's just use my phone. Fuck it. How many base characters are there in the Russian language? 33. Well, you just fucked up. All base 10, base 6 are self-part because Russian has 33 languages or characters and English has 26. Well, GG.
Glypsorpian sequence. Wow.
Exactly. Yeah.
Nope, we just proved it wrong.
Just for this, just such an emergency.
I run into an alien. Right.
Nope.
So I hate to ask you this question only because I don't like the question, but why not ask you? I'll tell you why I don't like it in a minute, but is math invented or discovered?
Invented.
Well, it's okay.
And forgive me for asking that question.
No, it's a super common question. Let's do an example.
It's invented.
Rather than like philosophizing.
It's invented.
So,
Tell me, where did numbers come from? They made them up.
The first substantive theorems that students learn in school is the Pythagorean theorem. So at some point, whether or not we've forgotten since then, many of us will have come across that if you have a right triangle and you label the two shorter sides A and B and then the longer side C, no matter what right triangle you have, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. It's a cool fact. It's not obvious that it should be true. It's useful. It lets you make sorts of measurements, and it's the first one you meet that it doesn't just like fall out of definitions. It's interesting and it's all that. Now, if you ask, like, is that fact invented or discovered?
But here's the thing.
It's a cool fact. It's right, and you label the two shorter sides A and B. Since then, many of us will have come across that if you have a right triangle, that too is invented. That doesn't just exist. A triangle is invented. That doesn't exist. You're acting like they're just things that we found them. No, they're not. They're things someone created, and that's how you found it, because someone else created it. That's it. Guys, I'm done. I'm honestly done. I was gonna do the whole thing, but if this is the best. A and B, and then the longer side C.
If this is the best.
No matter what right triangle you have, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. It's a cool fact. It's not obvious that it should be true. It's useful. It lets you make sorts of measurements, and it's the first one you meet
that's what he
doesn't
says.
just, like, fall out of definitions. It's interesting and it's all that. Now, if you ask, like, is that fact invented or discovered? Initially, it feels like, well, it's discovered for sure.
No.
You go out in the world, you see right triangles, you kind of you can measure.
You
them.
don't know they exist.
It's waiting there for you to see it and notice.
No, it isn't.
Just waiting for you to see it.
No, it isn't.
Then you get a little further in math,
You can't see it unless you really know what you're looking for.
and then you start to ask questions like, what is space? What is, three-dimensional space, two-dimensional space, and things like this. And then one of the ways that mathematically you're defining two-dimensional space is rather than saying, oh, it's this pre-existing thing and we can put a coordinate system on it, a lot of math will start from the coordinates themselves and saying it's all pairs of real numbers. So rather than saying like, oh, there's this plane out in existence, and then you put some like axes and you say, this is your x coordinate, this is your y coordinate to get to a point on space. You say, rather than all the tricky philosophical questions about what is a plane and whatnot, we just say a plane is all pairs of real numbers. That's what it is. And then you can do math forward. You can like make proofs and whatnot. But then when you say what's the distance between 2 points, and you have to assign what they call a metric to the space, a way of telling distances, you sort of make the Pythagorean theorem true by writ. You just you define a metric that makes it true, and there's choices for other metrics that you could have put on it. And then it starts to become kind of sticky. Like, wait a minute, was this discovered anymore? Or if this is how we're doing all of our math, where we say, a plane is just pairs of numbers, and that's mathematically what it is, then you don't have that same like, oh, it was waiting there to be discovered.
Wait, so Grant, how different is what you described from
So
knowing
dumb.
that there's a variety of space
So
where
dumb.
Pythagorean theorem applies as we learned it, but
Pythagorean theory only exists where you put it because you knew about it. If you didn't know about it, how can you put it?
If you curve the space, then triangles are different, right? A triangle, the angles sum to more than 180 degrees, where a traditional triangle, especially a right triangle, it all comes to exactly 180. So this would be a different metric for the space.
Yeah, I mean, so the idea that you can put different metrics on is sort of the superpower of being the mathematician, right?
Right.
So, and non-Euclidean geometry.
Because, math is a thing, and then once you know about it, then you can, make it up and they won't matter anymore because it's, math. And just shut up, you're an idiot.
Was discovered before it was, well, I say before it was used in physics, but if you're doing things on a sphere, that's fine. But
This is why I say there's two maths, by the way. There's the bullshit math, which is basically what he's talking about, it's whatever, and then there's the real math.
before all of the relativity stuff that really made it come to
Of course, right.
But this back and forth where you can have something that at one moment feels discovered and like this just kind of awe-inspiring
No, it
truth, and
doesn't.
at another moment feels like it was just baked into the definitions. This is a very
Pretty
long-winded
much.
way of answering the simple question that you asked: is math invented or discovered? For like how I like to think about it, it is both. But more
No, it's not.
specifically, I think you go out and you discover stuff based on your existing, either your world or your existing math. You use those discoveries to inform the definitions of the next step, and then you make more discoveries in that next step.
This is
and
really
you use
dumb.
those discoveries to inform the definitions further on.
So basically, what you're saying is math is discovered the way Columbus discovered America.
Pretty much.
What if we define it as the way?
Actually, I don't think so. No. No. I think even that gives it too much weight. It had less than that when it comes, because Columbus did discover something. It may have existed, but he discovered it. And the point is that math never existed. Math was never there. Columbus didn't come across it. It's just someone made it up. And my point is, math is so old that it's like we're putting the states and all the land on the earth, and now it can be discovered because it was invented once upon a time. And so you think you're inventing it now, but it already exists because you're a dumbass and you think, oh, they're so smart, don't take with these idiots. But in reality, no, shut up, dude.
West Indies by Ritz. We define it this. What if we define it as the West Indies by Ritz? We define it this way.
In a world where online scams and fraud are escalating with losses.
I don't know who you are, but you scare me.
Grant, you have a perspective on education.
Not really, I'm just
that
saying.
I highly respect. Even if I don't agree with every bit of it, I deeply respect it. And you part ways with many educators in that you don't necessarily prioritize. I don't want to put words in your mouth, so correct me if I misrepresent this.
You're wrong.
You don't put as a priority, you should learn math because it's relevant to your life, right? That's a typical way a math teacher would approach it. Worried that if they teach math and it's not relevant to people's life, they will just ignore it, get bored, go to sleep. So I have two questions for you. One, we probably agree that math, more than any other subject, is what people say is their hardest subject. Mm-hmm. So
I recovered this too. The reason why math is hard. Oh, by the way, let me just.
How do you get
There you go. The reason why is because math is counterintuitive. It's learned. It's not natural. It goes against every single impulse you have, and that's why it's difficult. It's because most people. It's kind of like trying to teach an old dog new tricks. It's a very freaking hard. It's very freaking hard. And the only old dog that's gonna learn that new trick, generally speaking, is a little bitch. Basically, much, and that's why I never learned math, because I'm not a little bitch. I had to learn basically. Okay, so basically, there's two maths to me. There is the real math, and then there's the bullshit math that we use every day and that we depend on because we're a stupid race and we created something so fragile that if for some reason there's a generation that grew up without math, we would be fucked, basically. So math, we're completely dependent on math. Language, not so much. Words, a little bit. But math, because it's kind of like the language to all the people as we have made it be, and why you fucking idiots think it's the language of the universe. Because if they grew up without it, we'd be fucked, basically. And that's the two maths. The real math, where it leads to chaos, and the bullshit that they created and we're kind of stuck with because they're dumbasses that decided to make the whole foundation on this. And you could say it's great and it's wonderful, it's amazing, it's whatever, right? And it works. Don't get me wrong. You're technically right, even though the whole argument itself you're wrong. And in general, it's just you're wrong, but you decide to make it right, right? So you made it right, despite. I forgot what I was talking about.
Around that, if they is their hardest subject.
Oh, you made it right despite everything. The reason why most people can't learn it, again, is because it's wrong. Everything about it is wrong. And the little bitch boy is yelling to learn what is wrong so that he has the advantage over someone who's smart. Or, oh, you're a fuck machine and you get bitches. This is why bitches like you later. It's because math is actually bullshit. Unless you're like me, where I know there's two reasons, and I know the second reason. I'm like, okay, fine, that reason, that's fair enough. Okay, let's learn it. You know what I'm saying? Then, all right, fine, whatever. Knowing what that is why I learned math, because I learned that it's wrong. Basically, math, it doesn't actually make sense. Things actually aren't accountable. It doesn't make sense unless you bend the knee and for the sake of just it works, trust me, then it works. Then it makes sense. Then you can do what you want. But when you're someone like me who's dun the proud and fucking just on top of it, you ain't gotta learn that shit. Fuck you, dude. Fuck you and your math and your rules and your system. Fuck all that bullshit. But again, I learned, okay, fine, whatever. Alright, fine, whatever. Whatever, I can't do anything. We all fucked. And that's what makes me one of like the most alpha motherfuckers in the world. Because when I was younger, I was like, fuck that shit. I had way a lot of bitches back then, but anyways, so I'm ready to walk away, dude.
Math, more than any other subject, is what people say is their hardest subject.
I told you why.
So how do you get around that if not by making it relevant to people's lives?
So
I told you how I got relevant.
Anytime there's a discussion of education, we should pair out the idea that explanation is different from education.
No,
and the
it's
idea
not.
Of, like making a YouTube video or making an explainer is a very different task from being an educator in a classroom eliciting something from a student, and that you're playing different games then.
I don't like this guy because he basically is the kind of person who basically invented poison that tastes like sugar, and he's feeding it to everybody.
Which is relevant to the answer here, I think, because if relevance is on the table, it's within a 1 hour.
Like he's splitting hairs, like he's taken what we knew for certain, and we never questioned it, and he's splitting hairs, and because we never questioned it, we accept it as truth. But it's already wrong. You're going down the wrong path and going to hell. And this is why Americans are all fucked up, and why little girls are sleeping with older men all the time, and why little bitches exist, and why low lives in society is all fucked up, and why there's animals that are managers that should never be, and why Trump is the president, why he should never be Trump, or why he should have never been the president. It's because assholes like you are changing the way people think and pretend land and fairy world and all that bullshit, and people are taking people for granted.
From being able to explain why this piece of math like actually touches someone's life. Amazing. Run with that. That's the most inspiring thing, if someone can see how it's useful to them. I have all sorts of friends who hated math, but I lived in the Bay Area for a while, lots of programmers there, and they came to love math through programming because they were into computer science. They saw that, hey, to do this graphics project, I guess I really need to understand matrices.
You also studied computer science as well.
I did.
Right.
And so, yeah, so a lot of my like social circles are.
They learned to use it because they learned they had to use it. They needed it. And again, like those kids, if they were like me, like in middle school, I think I invented this, like you have to do it or something. Because I learned, like, there's no other way. It's just the system, they use it. I asked all the teachers, like, at 5th or 4th grade, I asked my teacher. I remember, what was it? I know how to do the decimal. It was like 0.9. She said 0.9 equals 1, just for the sake of it, just whatever. And that's basically math. That's literally math. This is 0.9, but we're just going to say it's 1 and you accept it. That's math. 0.9 is 1. That's math. Right? And so when they told me that, I was like, no, what happened to that 0.01 or where that little bit go? Because every little bit matters. Period. Like, in reality, it doesn't matter. Oh, it's a remainder. Well, where does the remainder go? What the fuck? What are you talking about? You know, remainder is a division, but what the hell is a remainder? And again, it was just for the sake of and just to understand an idea. And I was like, no. And then in middle school, no, right? That's probably where I learned remainder and shit. And then high school showed up, and that's when I learned. That's when I talked to the teacher, and I was like, I just have to. And that's what I told her my rule. I was like, I guess I just gotta do it because you have to do it. It may not be right, it may not make sense, just it works. So.
In those spheres. And so that's a story I've seen many times. Where here's this bit where usefulness is what made someone find it. Like, that's great. But I think very often utility is just not on the table for a given piece of math all that soon. You want to teach some high schooler about the quadratic formula, and they say, when am I ever going to use it? The honest answer for that student
is never.
9 times out of 10. Never. Like, you might.
No. Not just never ever.
Okay, well, I made a mistake once. I was giving a talk to Pixar, and I used this as an example, like the quadratic formula. You'll never use it, so we have to like motivate in these other ways. Yeah. And then afterwards, all these graphics programmers come up. They're like,
we use it every day.
They're like, it was used approximately 1 trillion times to produce the movie Coca. And I'm like, okay, fine. Like, yes, it can.
Yeah. To be careful what you say to Pixar people. There's some mathematically and scientifically literate folks working for Pixar. Yes.
But yeah, so given for most people, never.
And if you ask those people, is math found or discovered? Or I'm sorry, discovered or created, they'd probably say created. They found it, and they found it because someone else told them.
They're never going to use it. Then you say, like, why learn it? And you could say it's simply not worth learning, right? You know, spend your time learning other things. But there's something about the mental exercise of rigorous thinking that is so pure in a mathematical setting that it really flexes some muscles that are going to be useful elsewhere.
Mathematician, go on.
Okay, yeah, no, it's self-serving, but like, I think the better analogy, if you want to tell a student why should they learn this, it's like if you go to a football player and they're in the gym and they're doing some squats, and you say you're never going to be on the field with like 400 pounds on your shoulders that you're like lifting in this particular way. They're like, no, 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 it's building muscles. And so I think a lot of the math that we do in school,
That's a shitty example because 400 pounds makes you stronger. Like, most of those kids will understand, that's why they do it, that if they're able to push against 400, that means that while they're out there, they can push a player who's applying 400 pounds of wall. Basically, that's all that means. So in math, there's no such thing. There's no comparison. What you just said is bullshit. And again, as far as that kind of math goes, that kid may be able to do that because that kind of math matters against basic math, right? Basic math, most kids will learn because they're too young to stand up for themselves, right? But I learned how to stand up for myself way younger than most people. So it just depends.
it's the same motivation. You're saying, no, 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 you're not going to use like this particular thing in the same way that out on the field you're not going to be doing like a
That may be why I don't know.
literal squat, but the muscles built doing it like really do make you more powerful later. That also, math can and I think often should be taught as an art simply because it's available, and like if you can get someone bought into the beauty of it, that is as inspiring if not more so than the utility. And often done right, it's more on the table than the utility is, given the constraint of say like a 20-minute online explainer or one
Just to be clear, I've seen some ugly math in my day. Put it out there.
I've seen some ugly paintings too, right? But that doesn't mean we can't. Yeah.
So,
That's fucked up. That's fucked up. You shouldn't say that. Cause math, like ugly math, like what the hell are you talking about? Ugly math? That makes zero sense. And for you to say ugly painting, like math isn't spirit or soul. Like painting is. Yeah, you're fucked up.
so tell me, would you count information theory as mathematics?
100%. Yeah.
And
yeah,
what makes it so?
Well, part of it's one thing. It's something we can describe very exactly.
Oh, that's as we started this conversation.
You
the
can
precision
have
calculation is what you value here. So you use information theory, I've been told, to help people in Wordle.
Yeah.
How's that even like? How does that work?
Well, first of all, for those of you who don't know, not saying that it's me, but what is information theory?
For sure.
For everyone else, check.
Yeah, I mean, for all the people out there that are listening right now, like, what do you mean information theory?
So I will answer that question, Chuck, by way of talking about this project Neil referenced, where back in, I think it was 2022, whenever Wordle became incredible.
Nice math, dude. Nice math. 2022. Fucking idiot.
This is one time when I got sucked in just as a programming project to say, like, how would you write like a bot that plays Wordle? Because it's so clearly something that a bot could play, but it's just a fun programming exercise to do it. And as I was doing it, I thought it was actually a really nice, motivating example to explain information theory to the general public.
No.
Because here you've got this game that a lot of people like.
No.
The first thought that I had for how to go about it involved these.
You say a lot of people because you're an idiot nerd. Little bitch ass nerd. And you have a lot of people you know because they too are bitch ass nerds and they're softies and they're liberals and you don't know how to take a hit because you're a bitch. Basically, I'm not trying to knock people that can't take a hit. Ever since my surgeries and my, what I've been through, I'm a lot softer than I used to be. But what I'm saying is that when you decide to give in to math, you basically gave up on everything else. So
These ideas from information theory.
unless you are like me, basically where there's two maths, the real math and the bullshit math that you guys use,
Oh, this,
that you try to claim that other life forms will pick up, that we're very far from now
this
for some reason.
So to answer your question, Chuck, often if you have a situation where, like, you're playing Wordle, and let's say you want to know is it better to play as a first word? So the nature of this game, you guess some letters. If those letters are part of the true word that you're like the secret word you're trying to get, they'll show up yellow if they're there but in the wrong spot. They show up green if they're there but in the right spot. So it's this game of like using your previous guesses to get more information about what the true word might be. And there's that word information. And so the worst starting example that you could use is the word kayak, Kayak. In some very like exact sense, this is the worst starting guess.
Yeah, I'm already seeing it right now. That's a suck ass word for what you just described. Those rules you just described. That is like the worst word.
Because it's like, what are the odds there's a Y?
Did you see that? He's not even a mathematician, but he could tell. Like, that's what I mean by math. Like, I'm gonna shoot a gun. Okay, so let's go up 20 degrees, to the left 10 degrees, down 1 degree, fire! Or just, you know what I'm saying? That we did the exact same thing. It's just that only in math that's whereas the other one's just you know what I'm saying? The other one's just literally my muscles. Boom, and doing the math is the machine doing it for you. Then like
In the word, like not very likely. What are the odds that it
that's
is in the word?
math.
Not very likely. You're not hitting that many vowels, so you have this sense that you're not learning that much about the word.
By the way, the valuation of Scrabble letters tracks this very
Yeah.
much,
Yeah, like
right?
how
Because
common is
the
it
rarer
here?
letters have higher value.
Makes
Right.
sense.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
I think
No.
this word information in a very
Doesn't
serious.
matter because in Wordle you guess X once, and if it's in your starting word over and over and over again, not a lot of words that have the word X, a letter X in there. That's stupid. What Neil just says dumb.
Sense. Where
Makes
it's
no
the idea, like,
sense.
I learn a lot from doing something versus I don't learn a lot. But who made it actually rigorous was a very clever guy named Claude Shannon, who was working at Bell Labs. And this is around 1930s, 1940s. You know, you've got all of these games to try to send information across a telephone line. Like if you're talking to someone, and sometimes it's noisy.
What was the point of putting Neil in the shot there?
And so you might ask, oh, should we like boost the signal? Should we have more line? Like, how can you think more systematically about?
By the way, Neil's completely fucked up on something. He always is.
How well you can communicate. And so he wrote this paper that's like the seminal paper for what's now known as information theory. He was the first one to use the word bit in this paper. So this was the first time that bits as a concept ever came up. And the basic idea there was like, if you, let's say there's something where there's two ways that it might go. You flip a coin, it might be heads or it might be tails. As soon as you see the result, you've learned something about like which path the universe took. And if there was only two possibilities, you know, that he said you've learned the unit of information here is 1 bit. But let's say there was like 100 possibilities and you learn a specific one of those. Somehow it feels like you've gained more information. And he came up with a formula for quantifying this, and then he used that formula and like relatives of it to try to describe how much signal you can send across something that has a certain amount of noise. And it made it such that there was a theoretical limit where you could say this is how much information we could try to get across, and then clever coding schemes could try to reach that limit. Now, in the context of Wordle, this means that you can put a number to basically how good a starting guess is based on there's a word like the Shannon entropy is like a fancy word for it. But basically, on average, how much information do you expect to get from it? Kayak has a terrible Shannon entropy in this context. A word like slate is actually very good. It's got that E, it's got that A, L, and T are very common letters. S, even if it's not going to show up at the end, is still a very common letter. And so I basically, made this video that was giving a walkthrough of using information theory type concepts and trying.
Slate isn't bad. There was one that was really good. I forgot what it was. But basically, it used three vowels and two common consonants. I don't remember what it was though, but it was really good. I use it as my opening word every time.
Trying to motivate what those concepts were as a way of like pursuing this little hobbyist game of writing a bot to play Wordle.
Here's one that you don't really hear much, but it's so important, and that would be the central limit theorem.
So the central limit theorem is actually as important for why it's like overused and like perceived to be more useful than it is for its utility. But there's a lot of things in the world that seem to be distributed according to a certain normal curve. And here's what I mean by that.
But they don't seem to be, they are. Right? What do you mean seem to be?
Well, actually, no, this is good fodder for discussion. Let's take heights, human heights, because I think this is a little bit in dispute. So if you go and measure a whole bunch of people's heights, you measure my height, your height, 1,000 other people, 1,000,000 other people, and you create a plot where, you bucket it maybe by the inch or something. So everyone who's between 5'9" and 5'10" falls in one bucket. Everyone between, 5'10", 5'11", another bucket. You do this for people in the same demographic, let's say. So we'll separate men and women, same country. You notice that there's this shape that kind of bulges in the middle and it tapers out on either side. And you do this for all sorts of other statistics, and you see the same shape that seems to bulge in the middle and taper on either side. And it's not just that, there's lots of shapes that could kind of bulge in the middle and taper on either sides, but there's a very precise...
You realize you're proving evolution, right?
...function that you can use that describes this really quite well, even in all these different situations. Got this funny formula. It looks like e to the negative x squared with some constants thrown in. But the idea is that by having a formula to it, then you can make exact predictions, like saying, hey, how many people, what percentage of people do you think would be taller than 6'4"? Or what percentage of males would be, shorter than 5'2"? And all of these sorts of questions. So the central limit theorem explains why this curve and not any other curve, like why this curve comes up. And just as importantly, it explains when it's actually going to come up, as opposed to maybe false cousins of it that seem to kind of look like it. Because the way that it'll happen is if you have a lot of different events that you're kind of adding together in some way. So in the pristine Platonic example for a normal distribution would be something like this. Let's say you and I stand outside and we're going to play this game where you flip a coin, and when it's heads, you take a step forward. When it's tails, you take a step back. So you flip a coin, maybe take a step forward, flip a coin, take another step. And you play this game not just with yourself, but with 10,000 of your friends. So you're all flipping your own coins. Each time, half of you take a step forward, half of you take a step back, roughly. And you flip, 15 times. So you're all stepping. Some of you got very, very lucky and took 15 steps forward. A more typical person, maybe they took like 7 steps forward and 8 steps back. But then if you look at where everyone is, that will follow a normal distribution very, very perfectly, or really, really closely. And it's because you have this idea that you took a certain kind of random event, flipping the coin, and you were adding the results many different times. And critically, all of those events were independent. Each coin flip didn't influence the next one. Whenever you have this, a bunch of independent things that you're adding together, it's not obvious at all that will always tend towards the same universal shape. And it didn't have to be a coin flip. It could have been any other random process with its own little internal
Monty Python or whatever.
Adding up a bunch of random things, which are all independent from each other, lands you on this universal shape. Now, the reason I was saying like seems to and waffling a little bit there is I do think that there's a lot of times in statistics when people will assume something's normal when it's actually not, or
normally distributed.
Yeah, like
because I assume Chuck is normal, but I question that.
Because you're the only one. That's why.
When you say assume something that it would follow a normal distribution.
Yeah, especially when it comes to long tail events. Yeah.
I gotta ask you real quick before you go forward, because when I'm thinking of this and picturing it, it almost kind of makes sense the distribution, because you're only talking about a coin flip. But you said any random, so let's take 10 white marbles and put them in a bag, and one black marble and put them in a bag, and these people play the exact same game with the same number of picks. You're telling me that same distribution is going to be represented the same way?
I mean, if it's not a 50-50 random.
So, this is good to be more precise. So let's say you pick out, very often you're picking the white marble, 1 in 11 times you're picking that black marble. You play this game. They make 20 picks. They're all independent from each other. You will still see a normal distribution. What will be different, the mean will be different. So everyone will have taken many more steps forward than back. So they're definitely going to be shifted up the road.
Just to be clear, everyone, he's a mathematician. He used the word mean. He means average. Okay.
Yes.
The average, their average position will be different.
We have a mathematician in the house.
The standard deviation.
It's not
or
the Stern
spread.
distribution, just like, get up, you take a step. I'm the mean distribution. Take a step, damn it, you loser.
No, it's a very insightful question. It's a very insightful question because it gets at a thing that I didn't mention, which is how, like, okay, it's not literally the same distribution where they're in the same point in space, but they'll be shifted up the road. They might be like spread out a little bit more. However, this curvy shape that you draw on top of it that has a very specific function, that's e to the negative x squared, that's not an arbitrary function, that with a couple parameters you tweak that just tells you like where is its center, how much is it spread out, just 2 different parameters, it'll still match that. That's the real surprise of it. It's like, of course some things are going to change, like where's the center, of course the spread is going to change, but the surprise is like that's the only thing. Somehow everything else that's interesting about the specific, ball and bag example you did, that gets washed away.
And by the way, the fluctuations in the cosmic microwave background in the early universe between hot and cold around the average is exactly this distribution, which gives us information of what happened way back earlier at the Big Bang, the quantum fluctuations that would have led to it. Very powerful means of analysis.
Average number of prime factors, you take some giant number and you ask like how many prime factors does it have, and you average that for a bunch of giant numbers normally distributed. It's just it shows up in all these different
so it's spooky
it's
how
spooky.
much it,
yeah
but it also, I think there's the regression to the mean for things where you have 2 smart people and they're smart because of some combination of whatever happened in their life, and then they have babies. It's not likely that their baby will be as smart as they are, because there'll be a regression back to the mean of everybody else. So it works its way in biology, is what I'm saying.
Are you trying to create a depiction where I'm the baby here?
No.
What's happening?
No. One more thing before we go to Q&A. Why don't we give a shout out to Fractals here. Tell me about a Mandelbrot set.
Love me a good Mandelbrot set. So this is one of those images that really captures the
Don't
public
leave home without one.
Yeah.
We need a Mandelbrot
Let me just
set.
say, in all my years of Star Talk, that was the geekiest thing ever said.
What?
All right.
Love me a good Mandelbrot.
Am I wrong?
No. So go ahead.
Oh man, it depends on how much detail you want here. The one version of this is to simply tell people, go to YouTube and search like Mandelbrot set deep zoom, and then simply look and gawk at the shape. And I think this is the way a lot of people engage with it. It's a really, really intricate shape that no matter how far you zoom in, there's always more detail to be found. And that's cool in its own right. What's cool from the mathematician's perspective is that it has a really, really simple rule that was used to describe it, even though it's producing this mind-bogglingly complicated shape. And that rule is basic. Stop me again if this is too boring or like too much detail. So the heavy lift here is that you have to start by talking about complex numbers, which is one of those terms that like sounds more complicated than it is because they literally use the word complex. But in the same way that numbers we usually think of as being on a number line, there's a really natural way of having numbers that live in 2 dimensions. So you choose a point on 2-dimensional space and there's a number associated with it. And you can do things like multiply it by itself and add numbers to it.
Do normal math operations.
Normal math. And so you start with some point and you basically say, all right, I'm going to call that point C as my like constant C. And then I'm going to play this game where I start at 0 and I'm always going to take the square of what I have and add C. So for example, you start 0 squared is 0 and then you add C and you get to C. And you're like, great. I'm going to do that again. I'm going to square the number, which is C squared. So if C was 1, you would have 1 squared. And then you add C to it, so you have like 2. And you play this simple game where it's almost like you're at a calculator and you're just pressing the button enter over and over and over, having done something like, what happens if I repeat this operation? Sometimes the process blows up to infinity. Sometimes it seems to stay bounded and bounce around. If you color each point on the plane based on which of those 2 things happens, you color it black if it doesn't ever run to infinity, it just kind of bounces around a whole bunch. and you color it some other color if it goes off to infinity. You maybe even give it a hue based on how quickly it runs to infinity. That simple set of rules, which you can write with like 3 lines in any programming language, that very simple set of rules produces this mind-bogglingly intricate shape. And it shows how complexity doesn't have to emerge from complex rules. It's possible for complex phenomena to emerge from very, very simple rules. And I think that's a powerful idea.
And by the way, Mandelbrot is a modern person, right? When was he born and died?
When was he born?
I mean, 20th century.
In my mind, yeah, 20th century. I think of Mandelbrot as like 70s is when I think of.
Yeah.
Like he worked at IBM, I think. I mean,
his first name was Benoit Mandelbrot. So I just found out when Mandelbrot lived. Born in 1924, died 2010.
Wow.
Yes, a man of our times there. Yes, indeed.
Very cool.
And so as you zoom in, you see new detail that is informed by the previous detail you just saw, but on a smaller and smaller, and it's that all the way down.
Well, that's the very classic, famous depiction of a fractal.
Yes,
it's the celebrity fractal. You know, this is just the A-list actor fractal that everyone wants to call in if they're thinking of a fractal.
But since it can be defined so simply,
I just want to let you guys know that everything that they are talking about has nothing to do with anything as far as outside the Earth goes. So, like, it's just...
The complexity is only what it looks like. But in terms of information theory, it has very little information associated with it. Because I remember, because I was active in this space briefly, and people wondered, can we use fractals to represent trees in an image from space? If we're going to model what forest versus land, non-arable land. And then some of that was abandoned, if not all of it, because nature actually has more detail than the fractal. So the fractal is like the lazy way to make it look like it has detail.
People do this in computer graphics too. They'll use fractals and fractal ideas to make it look like nature without having to use a lot of computer.
To actually do it. Okay.
Yeah.
Now you have to hear my Mandelbrot joke.
Okay, tell me your joke.
Okay, you probably know it. So okay. What is Benoit Mandelbrot's middle name?
I have heard this one. So
all right, go ahead.
Benoit Mandelbrot.
Of course. Okay. Of course, I have not heard.
That is good. That's good.
Can I correct? I'm going to be that guy.
If you correct me. I misremember it. Go on.
Well, that's the version that I know that I think holds a little better. His middle initial is B, so everyone refers to him as Benoit B. Mandelbrot. And then you're answering this like, hey, what does that B stand for? Well, it stands for Benoit B. Mandelbrot.
Oh, gotcha.
So then you're constantly filling in the B out to infinity.
Okay, you got it. Gotcha. That's the full. Thank you. I shortened it because my memory didn't hold the full joke.
I'm just going to let you know, as the resident layperson here and a comedian, it's not funny. Okay, so no, I'm joking.
Hey, Star Talk fans, I don't know if you know this.
I'm almost for a guest today. Questions.
All that is cosmic. Star Talk.
Shut up.
So Chuck, you got some questions from our Patreon supporter.
All right, I'm not gonna include that. Questions I don't give a shit about. So yeah, there you go. Math is bullshit, and there's why. Oh, last thing I'll say. Basically, the true math. So, the way I'll explain the bullshit math, the breakdown, the first one, well, not the first one, but a breakdown, I guess, is positive times a negative, and then negative times a positive, positive times a positive, and negative times a negative, right? That whole argument. Well, if you remember, that what I just said is a sidestep to math. So when you're doing math, you add up the numbers, right? And then you look to your right and you see that little positive times a negative, negative times a positive bullshit. And you look at your number, mine was a negative times a positive, and you look at the negative times a positive, it's a negative or a positive or whatever, and then you fill it in, and then you continue. Basically, that's an example of bullshit because I can go positive and times a negative, negative times a positive, and basically the certain numbers in a certain order, and they'll come out to have a different answer, which is why they made that rule. Basically, and math is full of those, and this is why math is hard because it's very counterintuitive. You have to learn that kind of side rule in order to just kind of bypass it, and most kids that will accept that as the way from the beginning will advance in math, the master math, but they tend to not be really good at baseball, for example. Because generally speaking, you're gonna be like, most kids in baseball are going to use the fundamental math, which again, out in the edges, it doesn't make much sense. And when you start getting kind of crazy with the numbers, it adds in chaos. But as long as you're using the numbers like 50 plus 50 and, things like between there, it's whatever. And like, 25 minus 15 is this and so forth and so on. It's whatever and it works. It's fine. It's whatever it is. But when you start getting onto the tricky kind of where it doesn't make sense and where a lot of people won't use it, and the only people that use it are the people that have invented it, basically, like, that's kind of what math is to me. Basically, there's a real math and there's bullshit math. The bullshit math, do whatever you fucking want with it, but I stick to the real math. And I only need to know so much. And there's certain times I might rely on the bullshit math. That's because I'm equating to somebody else and I have to make sense to them. I gotta use the math that they know. It's so much like a language. I'm speaking to you in English because you know English, right? Pero yo te dije en español, tú no sabes de qué, or like whatever. And you're like, what the hell did you just say? And all I said was, I can tell you in Spanish and you don't know. You're like, what? So, basically that's kind of yeah. Anyways, thank you for watching. Take it easy, take it real, and fuck your math. Fuck you, Neil, for thinking it's right. Fuck that other guy for trying to be a poison person who is just, takes what we take as humans for granted and turns it into poison so that we'll accept the rest of the poison. And then fuck the other guy for being too very accepting of it. And yeah, that's basically it when it comes down to it. So that's it. Thank you for watching. Take it easy and peace.